All right, all right, all right. It's Monday morning. I'm looking at the comments here. What is it with all these cheerful people? Happy Monday morning. Happy Monday morning to you. Good morning. Good morning, Chiefs. Morning, all. You know, ay, 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 ay.
I think I've referenced this before. What is it? It's We Were Soldiers, the Mel Gibson movie, and I'm forgetting the gentleman's name who played one of the lieutenants, the grizzled old veteran, in the beginning of that movie. And it may have been a young Matt Damon that opened up in the movie, and he's, good morning, Sergeant Major. He's like, how do you know what kind of goddamn morning it is?
Well, there is that, and it is Monday, and Mike's got a little bit of a cold, and I'm suffering from a motivational crisis. Today is a Sisyphusian Monday. What do I mean by that? Well, the week begins. There's the hill here. The rocks push them up, only to have them roll down over you, and then hit the repeat button next week. I'm happy to be alive, aren't you? Well, Eugene Carroll Towers rather than Trump Towers. I saw that meme again over the weekend. She popped an $83 million verdict against Donald Trump last week. And of course, he's vowing to take an appeal, and it's an outrage. And the legal system has been weaponized against him. And now I'm watching the Sharks circle Alina Habba. And, we've had some things to say about her on the show, basically her lack of presence in the courtroom and apparent inability to master relationships with the judge or the evidence code or the rules of civil procedure. But let's stop for one moment before we join the circling sharks and call for her blood. I want to talk to you briefly about the myth of client control. And what it's like to be a lawyer representing others. Let's face it, if you're a lawyer, you've acquired a law degree, most likely. There are some states where you can apprentice your way in. I believe California may still be one of them, and I think there's one other. You then pass a bar exam, and that means you acquire the right to represent yourself to the world at large as an attorney at law. Capable of counseling clients on their rights and responsibilities in the community at large, as governed by the rules, regulations, and customs of your community. And I realize that's a 40,000 foot view of things, but really, here's where the rubber meets the road. Client comes into your office. They describe a problem. They ask you if you think you can deal with the problem. In my world, most of those problems are criminal defense or First Amendment related. Mike does a lot of transactional work, meaning he helps people manipulate the world to accomplish private objectives, business deals, and so forth, regulatory compliance. One of the most important things that goes on in an interview between lawyer and client is the lawyer and the client sizing one another up. From the client's perspective, they're looking to the lawyer and thinking, does this person have my confidence? Do I believe they can handle the work? Do they have the requisite skill, training, and experience to perform for me? From the lawyer's perspective, you're looking at the client and saying, what is this client's issue? What are these clients' issues? How reasonable are their expectations? Can they afford to pay the fee? And if you're a smart lawyer, will they listen to me? Because there is a myth called client control. Sometimes clients want magic from their lawyers, and sometimes lawyers are foolish enough to think that they can perform magic for their clients. Lawyers aren't magicians, even though there is a lot in common between law and magic. That is the manipulation of a language that is uncommon to ordinary people to accomplish things that ordinary people want. So, for example, a magician says abracadabra, bam, and by sleight of hand, an amazing result comes in. A lawyer walks into court and says, this action is barred by collateral estoppel and the rule against perpetuities, and bam, something happens. From the standpoint of certain clients, those look like much the same, but they're not. And so when a high-profile client with deep pockets walks in, that appeals to the lawyer's vanity, because all lawyers believe they can improve upon their client's situation. They have insight, and if the client will but listen, they can help him. They can help the client navigate through a crisis. I suspect in the Alina Habba Donald Trump relationship. Donald sized her up as the best looking lawyer in Bedminster, and he's got an eye for the ladies. And Alina sized him up as the deepest pocket she was likely to meet, and a ride to the top of at least notoriety by representing the former president of the United States. They go to trial. E. Jean Carroll gets her verdict, and now, according to many, it's all Haba's fault. I don't think so. I don't think Haba walked out of court. I don't think Haba taunted the judge. I don't think Haba refused to follow court orders. I don't think Haba made the comments about E. Jean Carroll. I don't think Haba refused to back down. And I suspect that Haba counseled the president on taking a cautious course, and the president, being who he is, he decided to be a high-flying scoundrel that jurors won't like and didn't like, and therefore they punished him. So I don't know that it's meet or appropriate at this point to lay the verdict on Alina Haba and say it's all her fault. I think that Donald had something to do with it. Now, those of you who have followed this podcast for a while will think, oh, Norm's just, kind of whining because his client, Alex Jones, got clocked and Norm's trying to blame Alex. I think in a attorney-client relationship, lawyers don't create their clients' problems. Lawyers help their clients try to solve those problems, and sometimes clients make their problems worse by their conduct in court, out of court, and in response to a lawyer's advice.
It is also if I may add, it is also the case that those clients with higher net worths, especially if their success came through business and they are entrepreneurial, so that it's new money, as it were. It is often the case that the expectations of the court system, especially in the civil context, are far removed from what I would say is practical or realistic. And so a major deficit for most new attorneys in the transactional space is and this is something that the state bar, a given state bar, pays very specific attention to as well, in terms of taking, scope creep, taking on matters that you are competent to handle, et cetera. It's necessarily the case that those unaligned or misaligned expectations of the client who is high net worth, who expects to be able to deploy capital into a system and to fight something that he or she wants to see, come out a certain way, it meets in a perfect storm context with an attorney that knows that their fees are going to be paid, and as such will fail to assuage real concerns that the client may have, or lay out expectations in a way that does not set the lawyer up for failure later on, right? And what I'm saying in a real context is most younger attorneys, and even some older attorneys, but most younger attorneys want the paycheck, and they believe that they can become competent, or their inexperience gives them a false sense of assuredness or ability to affect certain outcomes, especially when within the litigation context. 50-50 is even a myth, I think, right? Because the best outcome is 50-50. It could go either way. That's not even necessarily the case. And I don't want to go off the rails too far, Norm, with respect to the concept of the vanishing trial, but litigation is a beast, right? And being able to counsel a client, control expectations by first setting realistic expectations and then exceeding those expectations is what every attorney should strive for, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things we have a 4-step process in evaluating potential clients in this office. First, do we understand what they want? And do they understand what they need? So, some people come in, they can't tell us whether they've got a criminal or a civil case. That's a lot of work if you don't know the difference between the two of that. Second, do they understand that there are, that we're not in this for pro bono work? We'll make the decision about when to be pro bono or not. Third, is the person somebody that the person taking the intake, the paralegal, can work with, the first date rule? Do you like them? And fourth is how reasonable are their expectations expectations. I turned a client away the other day who I thought had a perfectly good case, but his expectations were to have permanent and courting, infinite amounts of time and sympathy directed to him, and more money than the world can possess for a real harm that was worth something, but not all the client said he was, all the client wanted. And so we turned the client away to have them go elsewhere for a better alignment. So let's, client control is a myth.
Lawyer Will ask a good question, I think, though, here. I don't want to dismiss sort of the substantive legal merits of what we're talking about. Lawyer Will says, are these defamation cases? And he references E. Jean Carroll and Trump, and then Alex Jones, of course, with political angles, a recent development. He says, I just don't recall lawsuits filed in deep blue territory against political figures and then juries delivering these huge verdicts. And I agree. I think that that is a symptom of some sort of loss of integrity of the system when we can see not only the default judgments that precede the damages awards, but also, Norm, the damages award here of $83 million. And
Yeah,
of course,
60
I know,
some were punitive.
yeah,
And somehow E. Jean Carroll needed 10 million or $11 million to restore her reputation. I don't think most of us even heard of her beforehand, and now she needs to have her reputation restored because she's perceived as a gold digger and a political pawn for Reid Hoffman. Defamation case. So I don't know, Lawyer Will. I don't recall seeing them either. Certainly, these are eye-popping numbers, and I think there is a theory of so-called stochastic terrorism going on out there. And that is, if a person of high enough visibility makes negative comments about a person and those negative comments go viral, the viral comments inspire people in the community to take action against the person named. And so the president of the United States has the biggest platform in the world, the bully pulpit. And if he attacks someone, is he indirectly encouraging others to do his dirty work for him? This was certainly a major factor in the size of the verdict in the Alex Jones case, where the plaintiffs were able to put on an expert who talked about the number of social media clicks Alex Jones's media empire generated in a month, and then the jurors or the witnesses were able to come in and say, and this one did that, and that one did this, and the missing link was, of course, that anyone had actually listened to Jones and done these things. There was almost no evidence of that whatsoever. The court permitted the evidence to come in, however, on the theory that this saturation of the media with negative commentary and must or reasonably and foreseeably caused another person to act. Causation is the weak link in these cases. Let's see how they work out on appeal. By the way, Alex Jones's appeal will be argued on February 8th in Connecticut, and
nice.
we'll get some guidance from the Connecticut Appellate Court when we see that decision.
You know, Lawyer Will says using the judicial system as a political cudgel strikes me as a distortion. And I want to be very clear, right? We're also talking about the civil side of this thing, which means that the evidentiary standard or the standard of proof, burden of proof, is far lower on average than it is in a criminal context. So in the situation of defamation, we're talking about damages arising from some body of fact, right? But they're using this, they're using the allegations of sexual assault as fact, which have not been criminally adjudicated, right? So
No,
this
but
is
they didn't have to be in that context.
right, but what I'm saying is that, like, the standard of proof here for defamation, you know, with and then the punitive damages multiplier on top of that, I just tend to agree with Lawyer Will in this context that it is a complete distortion of what the justice system should be there for. I mean,
I think that's right. It doesn't. No, it's litigation lotto. It doesn't inspire confidence in the jury system. E. Jean Carroll could have worked 17 lifetimes and not made one half of what the verdict gives her. It's a policy statement, a political statement. But on this topic of stochastic terrorism and the influence that social media has over the behavior of others, and why those who are influencers should be held maybe to a higher standard in these defamation cases when people suffer harm, we glide into the claim that some lawmakers are making that social media is like digital fentanyl for young people. Mike, we've debated this on and off over the last few months. Why don't you take it from here? I know this is an issue you feel particularly strongly about.
Yeah, I do, and the headline here is mostly with respect to various states beginning to take action to, either ban the use of social media by young people. In particular, Florida is pushing a bill that would outlaw the use of social media by those who are under the age of 16. And then
Good luck with that.
then you've got New York and California, Arkansas, Tennessee. I want to be clear, because Norm, you and I have discussed the merits of banning, right, and the speech implications, et cetera. I don't think that there has been anything to date that is getting at the real problem, which is this sort of algorithmic uh, and manufacture of public discourse, search, et cetera. I don't, I do think that there is a clear and present danger to young people, young developing minds, in the use of social media. And I say that as somebody who has been using the latest iteration of whatever the internet has to offer in a recreational context since I was 15 years old, 14 years old, right? And so that's about 20 years of being what we would call surreally online, Norm, right? And what I know is that the current version of whatever the internet has to offer in terms of social connectivity and community and sort of creating online communities within high school students and stuff like that, it is something completely different from what we were working with back in MySpace days, right? With our top eight, right? And the fact that the average teacher didn't even have an online profile of something like that. Now we've got teachers that have TikTok channels and are trying to use them for extracurricular activities, whether positive or negative. The issue that I'm taking with sort of, I think that what we're seeing here is that it's just about attacking big tech for the sake of attacking big tech. For me, it appears like this is just a raw money grab by Congress people, right? They want to impose more regulations, right? Impose higher fines, stuff like that on these big purveyors of tech without actually solving the problem. And the problem is this general flattening of everything in our society, and then the control of knowledge and relevant discourse by virtue of these search algorithms and the collation of information and topical events. Take Hamas on October 7th, right? How that permeated our country overnight. Boom. And then there were demonstrations everywhere, right? There's a certain virality and a certain synthetic nature to everything that's going on that I think needs to be the focus of any sort of regulation or some sort of resolution as to what's going on. I don't like that we're just thinking about the young people have low self-esteem, and young people are thinking about suicide, and women and young girls. And it's like, this isn't even getting at the issue. The issue is that we're not giving people a chance to even learn how to think critically and become literate before we're just unleashing what is a complete opaque magician's cocktail on them in the version of this digital fentanyl, right? We're not
So
fixing the underlying problem. In other words, putting an age restriction on this is not like saying if you're not 16, you can't drive a car. It's not the same thing, right?
So I give you credit for keeping me focused on this issue. When it first emerged, I was opposed to content-based restrictions, basically saying that would be government control of speech. And then as you were presenting this story this morning, I thought, yeah, maybe Mike's onto something. But now our positions seem to have changed, because it seems to me that given the inherent danger of algorithmic control and manipulation of emotions, and the flattening, as you put it, of discourse. That is the inability of young people to make critical distinctions between better and worse, good and evil, let's say. Maybe the solution is to ban access to it under the age of 16, until such time that as the kids have a fighting chance of interpreting the data that's flowing their way. But you seem to be suggesting that's not a solution to the real problem. The real problem isn't really with social media. The real problem is with the educational system.
Yeah.
And if
So
that's true,
yeah,
if
let
that's
me
true, well, go ahead.
Yeah, so Vivek Ramaswamy, when he was on a recent podcast, the Andrew Schultz podcast, he's a comedian, and I think I commended that to you, Norm, but it's about 2 hours long. And one thing that he said, the phrasing that he put around this stuff, because remember, this is we really started debating this again because of his advocacy for the banning of social media for young people under a certain age. But what he said, and I think I'm taking a perspective on the administrative state, right? The current bureaucracy or the managerial class, as he would put it, is that I don't want to see the widespread creation at the state and federal levels of some sort of like digital social media oversight, administration or regulatory body. If anything, these sorts of things do not need to be first embodied in legislation. They need to create task forces, first. And these task forces need to have very narrow objectives, and they need to have a legitimate endpoint at which the task force can be disbanded. If the task force is able to deliver results, objective data and results, and studying what's going on, that's cool. And I'm also fine in the meantime with there being bans on the use of these things for kids that are under 16 or whatever, right? I'm okay with that. But I think what I'm
Who are
wary
you going to
of,
find? Your 14-year-old has a social media device on it. Is that a juvenile
right,
offense, or do
right.
the parents get tagged for
Exactly.
negligent
So I
supervision?
understand that. I understand exactly where you're going. I think what I'm wary of is that the public will be lulled to sleep in thinking that the federal government or our state governments or our elected betters have somehow solved the problem or done as much as they've could when they're really just doing more of what we need far less of, which is the creation of these administrative regulatory bodies to just meddle in the affairs of private business without actually having some sort of existential reason for existing, and then finding a way to get the hell out of the way once you've accomplished that objective. I think that all of this, right? I don't care who politically is doing it, but I will say that politically, when it's talking about, Democratic led cities in GOP controlled states, like it was bipartisan, all of that, I'm getting from that is a signal that's like, yeah, we're not actually solving the real fucking problem, to be frank
All
with you.
right. Well, I don't know. I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know that
Bipartisanship
there
in
is a solution to the
2024,
problem.
right?
I mean, it seems to me that we're giving. I mean, maybe you and I agree in the sense that letting government come in to fix something that perhaps is unfixable just gives it the power to interfere and make a bad situation even worse. On that, I want to do a hard shift, Mike, and
Do
we
it.
didn't talk about this beforehand. I expected to see more in the news today about this standoff at Eagle Pass between the state and federal government, and events seemed like to have been far more pacific than I expected them to be. Did you see much?
So I've seen a burgeoning issue with respect to the legitimacy of what um, Governor Abbott is doing. So in other words, now I'm starting to see on social media that people are attacking Governor Abbott for having bullshitted his way into this issue, and the fact that there is no real presence at the border, that it's still just as porous and open in Texas as it ever was. That's what I'm seeing,
Well,
which is
so
kind of
I mean, so I don't understand then. So basically, Abbott put up a razor wire fence, and everybody just decided to go to a different location, and the problem remains, and
effectively,
and
yes.
we've got a war of words and no practical solution.
Effectively.
Oh, people, you do need to go out and read Jean Raspail's Camp of the Saints. That book was so prophetic. It was an allegory about what's going on in Texas. The migrants are coming. The migrants are coming. The migrants are coming. What are you going to do about it? Maybe there's nothing to be done. Or certainly whatever is done, if it's ineffective, is just going to yield to an overwhelming situation at the various borders.
Well,
Hey,
maybe
let's
maybe it's everybody being cowards. Here's what's being reported on as of yesterday here that the Senate immigration reform could come as soon as this week, I guess, in the House. Some sort of bipartisanship about the border, which is effectively going to be giving more asylum status, more resources, blah 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 blah. Right?
While we're on that theme, blah 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 blah. What's this business about Donald Trump attacking Fannie Willis for being a racist? I mean, is the blah blah machine working overtime this week?
So it actually is an inquiry with the Georgia State Bar, right?
Yeah, I mean, come on. Who Trump joins the effort to disqualify Fannie Willis and accuses her of glaring, flagrant, and calculated effort to stoke racial animus. I don't like Fannie Willis either, Donald. And but I don't see this claim. I
Well,
mean, I
it's the special prosecutor, right? The special prosecutor that was appointed. I think his last name is Wade, Nathan Wade, I believe.
Yeah,
Who,
her squeeze.
yeah,
And
her,
so
that's
he's
her.
making fat money off of her appointment of him. And they're running around on cruises and apparently heating the sheets at various no-tell motels, while she's talking about the need to preserve democracy. But I mean, that's not a racist thing. I mean, that's just her double dipping, and it may be an ethical problem that
It was
precludes
like I
her
said
and
on
Wade from
Friday.
prosecuting.
It was her defense of the criticism that implicated the race card, right? It was
Remind
her.
me of how she did that.
It was her going to a congregation and talking about how if it were a white prosecutor or whatever, that this wouldn't be an issue. It's her explicitly making this a race-related issue that is now shining the light of prosecutorial misconduct on this case, right?
Please. I mean, look, Fanny was tedious. She got on the stage of a local African Methodist Episcopal church and tried to drape herself in the infidelities of Martin Luther King. And I think she did it on Martin Luther King Day. Yo, people, I'm not perfect. We know a man, aside, we know a man who used to bang people on the side. But I've seen the mountain and I've seen Nathan Wade's bulge. And let me tell you, I'd rather have Nathan Wade than the mountain. But I'm telling you, they're only doing this to me because I'm black. No, Fanny, we're doing it to you because you couldn't keep your legs crossed. And, realistically, you ought not to be appointing your boyfriend to be special prosecutor against Donald Trump and then eating out of that trowel with him on Fantasy Island or wherever you go to that's to scratch that itch that just can't be satisfied. But I mean, I'm all in favor of taking Fanny down and getting her out of the case and getting Wade out of the case. But the notion that somehow this is where, and I know I'm going to be accused. Okay, Junior Coltrane, here, get ready. Here, this is me. I've got D or T TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. This is just stupid politicking on Donald Trump's behalf. She's black, he's white. She can't keep her panties on. Okay, and she's jumping on Wade's rhythm stick and paying for the ride with Georgia taxpayers' dollars. That just doesn't strike me as a race-related issue. She gets on the stage of a church on Martin Luther King Day and tries to be the female Martin Luther King. Fanny, we're not buying it, but that doesn't mean that somehow this is a race-based prosecution of Trump or that she's stoking racial animus against Donald Trump. Or am I missing the point, Mike?
I think that you're not missing the point, but I do think that it. I take what you're saying for what it's worth and for face value, right? It's like, is this issue really what we think is legitimately going to be, what quiets the crowd in Georgia and what gets this case out of the media, right? I don't think so. But this is also the racketeering case, the RICO case. So there are 18 other defendants involved in this beyond just Donald Trump. So it's not only Trump. So everybody has an interest in figuring out a way to delegitimize this lawsuit in the mind of the public. And so the more that she uses her position and her visibility to delegitimize criticism of her, I think that there's going to be an equal but opposite reaction from the larger majority of those criminal co-defendants with Donald Trump in the case down there in Georgia. So I don't really have a problem with it. I just don't think that it's, I think that I think the irony is like that there is some sort of ethical obligatory backdrop here, right? Where it's like, hey, the state bar codes regulate this. And it's like, well, if the state bar was halfway decent at what it does in Georgia, would this case even exist at this point? But, I'll stop there.
Well, so, I mean, just as a side note for those of you who aren't lawyers, and this is going to come as a shock, put your hands on the steering wheel, sit down, buckle your seatbelt, put your coffee down. Ready? There's a code of ethics governing the conduct of lawyers. You're like, what? Seriously? That can't be true. I thought all lawyers were sleaze. No, there is a code of ethics. And among things that prosecutors are responsible for doing is striking hard but fair blows. And all parties are supposed to avoid making prejudicial pretrial statements that could have an effect on an adverse effect on the administration of justice. Now, Fanny's gotten way out over her skis in this case, and so she's the sort of prosecutorial equivalent of Alina Habba. In other words, an intellectual lightweight called to a forum that she's not fully capable of playing in. Fanny's punching over her weight, as it were, and she's and so she's trying to make the most of this moment by appealing to the anti-Trumpistas and perhaps to the black community to rally behind her now that people have raised questions about Wade. She shouldn't be doing all that. She should just be focusing on her case in the court and let public opinion take care of herself, or take care of itself, rather. But having said that, I think that Trump. Sometimes more is less, Donald. How about just sitting down and shutting up? How about focusing on the loss of American lives at the hands of Iranian terrorists in Jordan this weekend and what the appropriate American response should be to that? What we crave is leadership in this country. What we don't need is another entertaining jackass with his finger on the wind, deciding which way to bloviate based on the polls,
Julian says, "Isn't this a simple question of kickbacks, not
Yeah,
sex?"
Julian, that you nailed it. Yeah. And
Yes,
so,
yeah, it is. But that's why she took to the pulpit to implicate the race card. That's the whole point of this. Is that
yeah, I guess.
how do we get from allegations of impropriety and undue influence using a position such as that of chief prosecutor, right? $650,000, vacations, etc., to a boyfriend.
Well, no, I mean, but maybe Fanny's defense is there can't be kickbacks to a black person because there's reparations all the way
I would
down.
almost respect that position more than this, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yes,
It's
to your
tedious
to
stuff.
your question, Julian, yes. Let's see. One rule for Trump, another for the rest. Fanny brought race into it. Yep. I mean, we've hit all that kind of stuff. I
All
want
right,
to
folks.
because
Well,
one of
go ahead.
our one of our viewers up in the hills sent us this.
Good morning, Sergeant Major. How do you know what kind of goddamn day it is?
Yeah. I like that. That should be our motto. Mike's feeling a little under the weather today. Those of you who notice the AM quality to his voice, it's not the AM quality to its voice. It's a head cold expressing itself symptomatically. Mike, rest up. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. Let's see what the world brings us. This was not a Monday morning that filled me with joie de vivre about the week to come. But let's find, we appreciate your coming in and we appreciate your spending time with us. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 8.
That's right. And we will also have issue number 3 published here shortly. It will include a private YouTube link to our interview with Pete Atkinson. And I say our interview, I think I probably said 14 words total over about a 75-minute span. So it's the theme of grace. And so I will have that for you in just a few moments here, plus another essay from Norm on Nikki Haley. So look out for that. And if you're not subscribed, go to loudpoddaily.com and subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Norm, see you tomorrow.
No. Trump's big mouth is what people love about him. Don't you get that yet? He is pure hilariousness. I do get it, Junior, and I like entertainment as much as the next guy, but I also crave intelligent commentary and drawing distinctions with difference in making leadership, making and recognizing leaders who can make a positive contribution to the world. Donald Trump's perpetual game of mirror, mirror on the wall, who's got the biggest balls of them all. The mirror is starting to crack, Donald. Get a new gig. See you tomorrow, folks.
AMF, yo. See you tomorrow.
AMF.